Thanks for coming, and thank you, PyData LA, for having me. My name is Nick Acosta, and I'm a developer advocate with the IBM data science community. And today I wanted to talk about IBM Code and Response, and that is our project that is trying to address natural disaster preparedness and relief through open source. So if there are any here that are local to Los Angeles or to California, you know that it has been an extraordinary past couple of years. For instance, in this year alone, there have been almost 7,000 wildfires in the state of California alone, including, this is an image of the Getty wildfires that just ended about a month ago today, on the maybe 10 miles away from where we are now in around the Malibu area of Los Angeles. They burnt around over 1,000 acres of land, destroyed 12 homes, and again was just one of around 7,000 wildfires this year. Even worse was last year. 2018 was the most destructive and deadly year for wildfires in California ever. There were over 8,500 different wildfires in 2018 that burned 1.9 or so million acres of land in California, and unfortunately killed 99 people last year, including this is the Woolsey fire that just happened on the in the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles, and there was a campfire in Northern California as well. That was the deadliest and most destructive fire ever in California history. All right, and this isn't just a local issue, unfortunately, to Los Angeles or to California, but a national issue as well. So you can see here, 17 million acres have been lost to wildfire in the United States alone in the past 2 years. So it's very much a national problem and a global problem as well, with over 800,000 deaths attributed to earthquakes just this decade alone. So natural disasters are certainly among the world's greatest challenges. You know, that is only becoming more and more frequent and more devastating, right? So not only in financial loss, like the campfire that I just referenced was the most expensive natural disaster of last year in terms of like reclaimed insurance money, but also, you know, and much more importantly in terms of lives that we're losing to natural disasters. And the scale, I think, is certainly too big for someone to take on alone or for one company to take on alone. But I do think that we can take some of the innovations that we've seen in the tech industry. We're really providing innovations and changing a lot of different fields. I think that we can apply some of that same sort of technology and innovation to this area of natural disasters, right? And that's what IBM is trying to do just community-wide within the open source community with IBM Code and Response. So IBM Code and Response, our aim is to inspire and enable developers to create innovative solutions to reduce the impact of natural disasters. So together, IBM and our partners are going to deploy these solutions in communities which need them the most, all while shining a light on the heroic work of saving lives around the world through technology and volunteering. And that's what I'm going to be talking about for the next 30 minutes or so. So we have an agenda for what I'll be going over today. Touched on some of the wildfires that we're experiencing and have experienced here in California before introducing Code and Response. In part two, shortly, I'll be talking about Call for Code. What that is, it's a project, an annual project that IBM has been working on with some partners. So some of the things that we've been doing in the past 2 years with that. Before talking about some other initiatives in Code and Response, I'll be discussing Python's impact on these programs before wrapping up. So Call for Code. Call for Code is a worldwide developer competition that seeks technology solutions for natural disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. So if you can see here, IBM is a founding partner of Call for Code. but it is very much a collaborative effort with a number of different partners that you can see here, including the United Nations and the American Red Cross. You can see here to the right some of the prize structure that we have for this worldwide developer competition. There are cash prizes involved for winners and finalists. But again, through Code and Response, one of our main goals is to deploy these solutions and get them in the hands of those that need help. So you can see some of our prize structure is aligned to support that. We have the ability to open source projects through the Linux Foundation and receive support from the Linux Foundation and its open source community, and provide things like solution implementation support, which I'll touch on here in a later slide. So 2018 was our first year for Call for Code. And we had a Project OWL were the winners of our first Call for Code competition. And their project keeps first responders and victims connected in a natural disaster. So we had one winner in 2018, but there are over 100,000 different participants, developers building over 2,500 applications that were representative of 156 different nations participating in this competition that was running from March through October. And you can see some of the technologies that Project OWL used here. So what their project is, it is a two-part software and hardware solution where they are using an incident management system here, where you can see that they are using something that's fast and simple to be able to identify and respond to incidents in the presence of a natural disaster. And I think a really innovative part of their solution was their hardware component, this cluster dock mobile network that would be able to quickly stand up an ad hoc Wi-Fi network service through the use of IoT mesh devices, where they could quickly deploy some of these devices and stand up a mesh network that could span, a number of square miles, and they were resilient. They're resilient devices that can even, be deployed in the presence of a natural disaster. So this was a project developed by some American developers in response to Hurricane Maria that happened in Puerto Rico in 2017. But it certainly wasn't an American competition. There were finalists representing really all points of our planet. We had 5 finalists in 2018, and you can see some of them in their representative countries listed here. And I also wanted to point out here at PyData, so there is the number of technologies involved, including, you can see many of them reference IBM Watson Studio, which if you are familiar with like a Jupyter Notebook environment, that's just IBM's implementation of like a hosted Jupyter Notebook environment and some associated services. So some of these projects are relying heavily on Python to produce work to help others. In October, we just finished our second iteration of Call for Code. And we had a group of developers, health professionals, and firefighters build out a solution called Prometeo. And Prometeo protects the health of firefighters and first responders with individual wearable devices. And we were also able to see in our second year, we almost doubled the number of developers that were involved and doubled the number of applications built. So it's been cool to see that growth just in a short amount of time with Call for Code. In Call for Code 2018, our prompt was to challenge developers to build technologies for natural disaster recovery and preparedness. In 2019, it was to help alleviate some of the health and wellness concerns that can arise in the presence of natural disasters. So what Prometeo is doing is a wearable, which you can see a prototype of the wearable in the top right here. of my screen, and it collects basic telemetry of firefighters, which is sent to an IoT platform to collect that information, information such as the temperature, humidity, the presence of smoke, and other gases that could adversely affect these firefighters, and then send that not only to a machine learning service that could assess the risk and whether or not a firefighter may need to evacuate his current area, but also to a dashboard for monitoring. Being here in Los Angeles, I also wanted to point out, just as in 2018 we had 5 finalists, in 2009 there were 5 finalists as well, including the Rove team that you can see here that enable emergency responders to reach victims in the shortest amount of time. And this was a project that I wanted to highlight because this was done by Daniel, Max, Brian, and Lucas, who are all CS undergraduate students at UCLA. Just close by in Brentwood. So these are students that were developed this solution and became finalists. I think that they were the second runner-up this year for Call for Code 2019. And because of the work that they were able to build out through Call for Code, they actually ended up creating and running a student-led organization at UCLA called NOVA, whose goals are to build out software to tackle problems and write software for social good. So it was cool to see them not only build this solution, but try to spread what they've been doing across campus. So that's been the first 2 years briefly of Call for Code, which is a component that Code and Response has been running with a large help of some of our partners. I wanted to touch on quickly on IBM Code and Response as well. Before I do, does anyone have any questions about Call for Code? Maybe I can quickly take one. And we can have some more questions at the end if anything comes up. But again, our goals for IBM Code and Response are to inspire and enable developers to create solutions to reduce the impact of natural disasters. So if you have a technology or an idea for a technology that could help others, but maybe some barrier to getting it in the hands of those that it can help, and IBM can help remove those barriers, IBM Code and Response is the way that we are planning to do so. Right, so the difference between having an idea that can help others and actually helping others can be maybe one resource or one contact that you may be able to need, or even just like a cloud database that maybe your resource strapped and need help with that. And we want to be able to provide those resources because it can be a small difference between an idea that can help people and actually helping people, and it can be just as small of a difference between, or just as big of an impact, in saving lives with some of the technologies that we're seeing here through Code and Response. So I touched on Call for Code, but there are a number of other initiatives that we are doing under this Code and Response umbrella. This whole process is built from the top up with open source in mind. Right, so it's open at the core, and we're providing access to maybe some of the more resource-intensive open source projects. So if you have an idea for a solution that maybe requires a blockchain fabric, we can have Hyperledger, or a container manager. We can provide access to Kubernetes and Hyperledger and some of those other open source projects that maybe take a little bit of work to get off the ground. And all the code stays open, right? So all the code that's prepared through IBM Code and Response initiatives has an Apache 2 license and is deployed with open governance models that can be scaled through open governance. So as I mentioned at the beginning, natural disasters are a very global problem. And to address them, we need just an equally as global of a method to begin to tackle these problems. And in technology in 2019, that means definitely means through open source. It's the only way that I think that this sort of work can be done. If you are familiar with GitHub's State of the Octaverse, they stated that here in 2019, of the open source projects that have over 100 committers that are hosted on GitHub, they are represented on average by 41 different countries all working together on these open source projects, which is a huge number, right? 41 different countries on average building out these technologies. And not only is that a huge number, it's a very big, it's seen a tremendous amount of growth in the recent years. So definitely a very global community now, the open source software community, and I think that it can be very effective in addressing some of these concerns like natural disasters. So the 2018 Call for Code winner, Project OWL, began test implementations through IBM Code and Response just this March. So you can see that they started field tests in Puerto Rico that focus on the deployment of their cluster duck IoT network, so these devices that could stand up a Wi-Fi network when that goes down because of, say, a hurricane or other natural disaster. So they were able to set up these mesh networks, access them via mobile phones, and begin to transmit data and send them to this incident management software system. So Project OWL worked through IBM Code and Response with not only the IBM Corporate Service Corps, but some of our contacts with local government officials and the University of Puerto Rico as well. If you would like to get an update, there was just some more testing that they had done, I think maybe last month. Their GitHub page is linked here, and I'll be sharing a link to my slides at the end. And all of the projects that I've referenced specifically all have hyperlinks to their GitHub repositories as well. So if there's something that has caught your interest, all of these projects are open source, and you can help get them to a state where they are helping others with these technologies, right? And I think that that's as important as ever, especially for this Project OWL solution, because it's been 2 years since Hurricane Maria, but Puerto Rico is still facing many issues. You can see here that there are 2 articles from the New York Times. One came out last year in September on the first year anniversary of Hurricane Maria. On Hurricane Maria anniversary, Puerto Rico is still in ruins. And then just a couple weeks ago, Hurricane Maria, 2 years later, we want another Puerto Rico. So in this article that just came out recently, they were saying that there was still over 30,000 different homes in Puerto Rico that are partially or totally covered. Their roofs are partially or totally covered with blue tarps because their roofs are failed or broken or leaking or all of the above, right? So still definitely need all the help that they can get. So I'm happy that this, technologies like Project OWL are being worked on to be deployed and in the hands of those living in Puerto Rico that need help. Another project that IBM is working on that actually also came from Puerto Rico is DroneAid. So DroneAid uses a symbolic language that was developed by the United Nations. And in the presence of a natural disaster, the idea is that DroneAid will take drones and be able to run object detections on these symbolic languages and be able to recognize when these, when a drone sees these labels, and it will be able to plot where these locations are on a map and initiate a response. So you can see that there's a language here like this is a symbol that means that there's water needed in this area or food needed in this area. And this was developed at a codeathon that we prepared to help produce solutions for Call for Code and was just recently, a couple months ago, picked up by and open sourced via the Linux Foundation. And you can find more information on DroneAid at its GitHub as well. So speaking at CSU LA, I wanted to quickly touch on the Clinton Global Initiative and the CGIU programs. So IBM Code and Response has a partnership with CGIU where we are hosting 10 codeathons that will engage and inspire college developers to build technologies that are modern and using open source technologies to develop solutions for natural disaster response and resilience challenges. So some of these codeathons have already been run at ASU, ETH Zurich, Miami-Dade, RPI, UC Berkeley, and UCSD. I have a picture here of the winners of the UC Berkeley Codeathon. And I wanted to reference them specifically because not only did they win a Codeathon and get a cash prize through that event, but they developed their solution. It's called Project Aster. They developed their solution, entered it into Call for Code, and were a finalist this year for Call for Code as well. So kind of won twice with that project, and it's been cool to see that project develop. Their GitHub is linked on this picture as well. The CGI and CGIU have deep roots here in Los Angeles that I wanted to quickly touch on. Bill Clinton actually announced in 2006 what would end up becoming the Clinton Global Initiative at UCLA is where it was first announced, and it became the CGI a year later. Here at CSU LA, they hosted a codeathon with CGIU to help, I think it was to help alleviate heart disease in women, I think was what their hackathon was based on. And that was 4 years ago, so it would be great to see some more participants. You know, maybe we could have another codeathon here would be great. And then CSU Northridge, that's just in Northridge on the in the Valley, is a CGIU university partner, right? So pretty deep roots here in Los Angeles. If you're an educator in the audience and you're interested in partnering with IBM Code and Response and CGIU, I would love to speak. I quickly wanted to discuss the role that Python has been playing here at PyData with IBM Code and Response. So you can see here on the right, GitHub's State of the Octaverse, where they ranked the top programming languages in their appearance on GitHub. And just this year, Python passed Java to become the second most popular programming language on GitHub, which is awesome. And you can see that that's reflected in Call for Code samples as well. So I just took a random sample of 100 different projects on GitHub that reference Call for Code. And of those 100 projects, 40 of them were using Python of some sort. And I don't know, to my knowledge, GitHub hasn't released how much more popular Python is than Java now. I don't know the ratio of these, just their ranking. But it was cool to see that Python is used twice as often as Java in these Call for Code projects. And again, it was used by the 2018 winner, Project Owl. It was used by a number of finalists, including those finalists that I mentioned from UC Berkeley and UCLA. So to review, IBM Code and Response is an initiative through IBM to help inspire and enable developers to build technologies that help aid in relief natural disasters. One of the components that IBM is putting on together with Code and Response is Call for Code, which is a global competition that we are putting together with a large number of partners in March. Around the March timeframe, we will be starting our third year of Call for Code. So we'll be in the third year of at least a 5-year commitment. So I'm looking forward to Call for Code 2020, 2021, and hopefully many years after, right? So if you're interested in participating, I think that prompt will be coming out soon, our challenge. And if you're interested in partnering, you saw the large partnership ecosystem that we have. It's not just IBM, it's United Nations, American Red Cross, the Linux Foundation, things like that. I would love to speak, and maybe we can get a partnership together as well. So there's participation opportunities. You saw some of that prize structure. I imagine that'll be very similar next year. And you saw our partnership ecosystem as well. So with that, I wanted to thank you all for attending. Again, my name is Nick Acosta, and thank you, PyData LA, for having me. So I can quickly, I think we actually, it doesn't, how much time do we have? Oh, okay. So does anyone have any questions?
Thank you for the talk. I work in conservation scape, and we have like plenty of other organizations that do something similar.
Yeah.
For example, Conservation X Labs. And what I've been thinking about it. These programs are really great, but what happens is solutions exist to the problems that get defined, but when when the question of production to the scale comes up, that doesn't happen because that might not be even the objective of what you're doing or what everybody else is doing. So it kind of like, yeah, we define the problem or problem existed, solution exists, but then that's it. So does IBM or your project has any goals taking it to scale?
Yeah, so the question was, there are a number of maybe similar incentive structures, right, that not only IBM and our partners are putting on together, but some others. And it can often come that a problem gets identified, but then, technology isn't really built to fully be deployed and be able to address that problem. And first, I would like to address and acknowledge that IBM isn't the only option if you have an idea for technology to help others. There are many different contests that other organizations, both large, as big as some of the other cloud service providers, are doing similar things. There are some smaller organizations. There's a lot of different avenues if you have an idea to help others to get support. But what I like about IBM's that I'm seeing is, I think is unique, is that price structure that we have, where we're not just giving money, but also deployment services, right? So you will get access to like IBM Service Corps, who have experience implementing and consulting to be able to build out these solutions. And I think that another thing that you mentioned, she also mentioned that there are some maybe problems or solutions that get repeated. I think that that's where open source comes in very heavily, right? And the mandating that all of these be open, hopefully we'll see others, and we have seen others contribute and add on top of solutions other than rebuild them. We've actually seen in 2019, we saw there were some contestants that submitted to Call for Code 2019 that took the winner from 2018's Project Owl. They took their project and tried to add on top of it, right? And then just really resubmitted it, and that's exactly what we're trying to see, right? So I think to answer your question, to reduce that duplicability is open source, I think, for sure, keeping everything open. And then, just being aware and keeping in mind that identifying a problem is definitely step 0, right? And we need to be able to work just as hard to not only give out prize money to incentivize the identification of these problems, but have steps to actually build technology and get them in the hands of others. And I hope, and it's been like a big goal of IBM's that we're doing just that. So,
I actually had a question. What resources are available towards the developers that are in the competition?
Yeah. So we do have a number of stipulations that we saw as far as keeping your code open and things like that. I think that there's another rule that I think everyone maybe has to be over 18. We have an FAQ page at callforcode.org, and you can get more information on code and response at codeandresponse.org. But yeah, there are not only some requirements, but some things that we will provide access to as well. Helping getting these solutions, maybe some resources that you may need as far as like compute services and things like that.
All right, let's give a round of applause again for Nick for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.